All right. So we are good to go. I want to give a couple of seconds just for people to start coming on in. But to your point, it is always interesting to do a self search, whether it be on Google or YouTube. I do come up with old interviews myself, stuff back when I was like in my 20s. I just turned 44 a couple of days ago, and I'm like, I don't even remember that interview. And it's searchable.
It's great too because I actually started doing it because he was doing it. I said, "Oh, let me check," and sure enough, I actually did those Google notification things that comes in your email, and you'd be surprised where your name pops up. Everything from NPR. I do remember doing the NPR one years ago with Jamila Bay, but vaguely. It was so long ago. It was vaguely. All kinds of stuff popped up. All different podcasts. You name it.
Ron, have you ever
It
searched
never
yourself
goes away.
anywhere
It's there
outside of
Never
forever.
YouTube?
goes away. Never
Yep.
goes away.
Do you ever search yourself on you on Google as well?
I've done that, not so much Google. I've done it on Wikipedia, and that's when I found out years ago that a fan had started a page for me. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a shock to the system. But yeah,
Yeah, I feel like you haven't made it until you have your own Wikipedia. You know, thankfully, Majestic, myself, yourself, we all have Wikipedia. So I think we all have felt like we've made it at some point. But yeah, that Wikipedia one is a doozy. Looks like we got some people coming on in now. Gonna wait a
Yeah.
couple more seconds before we do the introduction. I also enjoyed going down the rabbit hole, just learning about the different works that you were involved in,
Oh
even
yeah.
just doing a brief overview. It's like your catalog is extensive. I mean, I cannot wait to talk about that.
Yeah, because I saw that and instantly realized I had a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
man, I tell you, it's in hindsight now, but I mean, it's particularly at my age to look back on all this, right? And it's only the last few years, this real awareness that this gift from the Lord is what it is, and that I mean, I can remember being this 12, 13-year-old kid who dreamed of working in comics, and now I look back on this body of work and some of the things that have happened to me and I've experienced, and it's like these amazing blessings, right? And I start to understand that he was there guiding this, he was there directing this, he was there even in the failures, all right? But it was all a set plan, and I am more and more comfortable with my faith of understanding that it's his will. We say the Our Father all the time, but do we really give those words the weight they deserve? It's his will. It'll be done regardless.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I am curious about that as far as how much of your faith informs your writing. Because I know you're very strong and a very proud Christian. So my question to you is like, how much has that influenced your writing and the your ability to storytell?
Uh, I think a great deal. And I'm more now aware of that than I ever have been before. But even as far back as like maybe 20 years ago, I can remember writing a vampire graphic novel that I did with my friend and publishing partner, Rob Davis. He did the illustrations for it, right? And here I am writing this daughter Dracula graphic novel, and it's all full of darkness and horror and bloodletting and whatever. And halfway through the script, I literally start getting this urge to turn it around on itself to the point where she literally gets redeemed by God at the end of the book. So yeah, it informs me. All right, it's just it's such a huge part of my life, and I sense that more and more. I look back on some of the things I've written, and it was always there. It was always something that I leaned on. That you know, it's a case of what are you putting out into the world? What do you want the people? What do you want your readers to get from this? All right. And I'm a firm believer in the old, good versus evil is the basic storylines. It's what it is. It's the world we live in. It's good versus evil. And I try to do my best that no matter what I'm writing, whether it's horror, westerns, or mysteries or whatever, there's a line that I won't cross. Evil will never win in any of my stories.
Mm. Oh, I can't wait. I mean, I don't even want to get any more questions because we haven't introduced you yet, and I feel like it's just informal. So let's just get that out of the way because I feel like we're about to go into this, and I'm so excited to be able to pick a mind like yours. So, today we have the pleasure the pleasure and the privilege is what I really wanted to say. The pleasure and the privilege to interview Ron Fortier. I first met Ron on the Indie Comics Relay with Keith Gleason, Harry G, and Johnny C. He is a veteran serviceman and writer whose career spans over 4 decades across comics and pulp fiction. From The Green Hornet to Brother Bones, Ron is an institution, instrumental in shaping modern pulp storytelling. Please join us in welcoming Ron Fortier to the program. Man, so welcome. Like I said, as soon as we figured out we could have you on the show, like I reached out to Tombstone and reached out to Joe, and I was like, listen, we have to be able to talk to him. We have to be able to pick this man's brain. From the amount of stuff that you've been involved with the people you've worked with, how could we not at least reach out and try to pick your brain? So welcome to the show, and we're honored.
I'm really appreciative, Graydon. As you already know, the Brother Bones things is the current project that I'm involved with my good friend and fellow Coloradan artist Joe Arnold, and we've got a Kickstarter up there now. And way back when we were planning this to launch it, we, both of us realized that the market is so crowded today with so many projects out there by a lot of really talented creators that we needed to get super social and hitting, the internet and doing these kinds of podcasts, letting people know it's out there. Okay. And so having this opportunity, as we've done in the past week and the other shows we've been on, we truly, truly appreciate this chance to, get here and talk comics, the history and where we come from. And again, maybe promote and get maybe a few of your listeners on board to check it out.
Absolutely. Hey, Tombstone, can you pull up the link and we can post that in the chat so that everybody knows where to go for this Kickstarter campaign?
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that I really keep this centered around the project Brother Bones, because I know when people interview, they like to talk about the whole scope of things, and that's fine. I'm sure they can look out there, but I want to know more about this project, this Brother Bones pulp project that you got going on with Joe. I'm curious to know about that. What can you tell us about that?
All right. Well, Brother Bones is a character that I created maybe almost 20 years ago. A good friend of mine was publishing a series of books and looking for a pulp type character. And he knew that I was a big fanatic of an enthusiast and fan of the early pulp magazines. This was before I and Rob even launched our own publishing company. So he asked me to come up with some idea of a pulp character that would work in this fictional city he wanted to create, and do short stories and put them up on the net for this magazine he was doing, this internet magazine. All right. So I thought it'd be fun to do an homage to the Masked Avenger pulp heroes. Arguably, the greatest pulp character ever devised was the Shadow. And then later, an opposing publication came up with the Spider, an even wilder version of the Shadow, if you will. And then more and more came along, copies and dozens of whatever. I enjoyed those kind of lone wolf Avengers. So I came up with the idea of a fictional city on the West Coast in the 1930s called Cape Noir. And it's one of your typical Gotham metropolises, which is filled with millions of people from all walks of life, but it's also rife with corruption and gangsters and crooked cops and all that good stuff. And in that setting, I would put Brother Bones. All right. Brother Bones, as the story opens up, is a twin. His name is Tommy Bonello. He has a brother named Jack Bonello, and they're the two top hitmen for the biggest mobster in Cape Noir, Topper Wild. Okay. And so they've gone out and done multiple murders for this guy. But what happens in the course of the opening origin story, and it's a short novella, Tommy ultimately has this weird conscience starting to grow in his mind. There's a sequence that happens where he shoots and kills this young teenage prostitute. And before she dies, she thanks him. And that haunts him. It just haunts him for the next couple of days. He wakes up in the middle of the night hearing her say, thank you, thank you. And how can a life be so horrible that you're thanking the person who takes it from you? And so ultimately, because he can't shut that voice off, he tells his brother Jack. Jack gets real nervous. All right. And man, if the boss finds out you're having any kinds of, second thoughts about what we do, et cetera, it's going to mean the end for both of us. Okay. Well, Tommy, on his own, ultimately realizes he's going to go crazy unless he can shut that voice off. And what he does is one night sneaks out of their apartment and goes to the local church, okay, and talks to the priest there. And basically, in his talking with the priest in the rectory, basically confesses his life. The priest is shocked. I mean, this is a history confession like none of these ever heard before. And he basically tells Tommy that he doesn't think there's anything he can do for him, i.e., to shut the voice off. But he knows another padre who might be able to help him, and sends Tommy out of Cape Noir into the surrounding hills where there's a monastery called Mount Serenity. And it's run by these monk brothers. And he tells Tommy if he goes up there and is accepted as one of them, then he'll get an entire new life and change his ways. Tommy takes him up on it. It doesn't tell Jack or anybody else in the gang. So he basically disappears off the grid as far as Cape Noir is concerned. And Jack goes nuts. The rest of the gang, everybody's looking for him, till ultimately they come to the conclusion that a rival gang has taken Tommy out and he's been killed. Okay, so they got to live with that. Until one of the gang happens to be driving through the hills, stops at a gas station to get gas, and sees all these monks walking past down the road and recognizes Tommy as one of them. Rushes back to tell Jack, and Jack goes ballistic. Okay? Takes a bunch of the guys, they drive out to Mount Serenity and confronts Tommy. When Tommy sees them coming, he tells the other monks to stay where they're at. He'll take care of it. He goes to confront the car as it stops. Jack comes out. What are you doing? This is crazy. You were warned, blah, blah, blah. Tommy tells him, do what you got to do, Jack, but leave these good men alone. Jack pulls out his gun and shoots him in the head, kills his own brother. At which point he then turns around, tells the rest of the mobsters to wipe out the monastery. And they do. They kill all the monks and they set the place on fire. At that point in the story, we shift to Tommy's soul, and it's caught in some kind of limbo. And basically, the fates address him in this limbo and tell him his work isn't done. he was on the right path finally in his life with making atonement, but now he has to really amp it up, i.e., they're going to send him back down to Earth as an undead Avenger. So basically, he's a walking zombie sent down to Earth to make atonement for all his sins by protecting the innocent people of Cape Noir. Well, when he gets back down to Earth, he's basically he's this dead body. He's in the ashes in the monastery, and lo and behold, one of the brothers had been making a ceramic skull mask for Mardi Gras. Tommy, this whose face is decaying now, picks up the skull mask, puts it over his face, gets an overcoat and a slouch hat, and makes his way back to Cape Noir, and now is Brother Bones, the Undead Avenger. So now, write the first story. Over the next 2 years, I write 6 other stories. In the interim of all this, of writing all these Brother Bones stories, Rob and I created our own publishing house, Airship 27 Productions. At which point, Rob says to me, we've got enough for a book. Let's put this out. All right, so we collect them. First book in the series, Brother Bones, the Undead Avenger. I'm starting to write a second collection of stories when I get an email from a fan writer who'd read the first book, went absolutely nuts for it, writes me and says he's got an idea for a Brother Bones novel. Can he write it for me?
Wow.
Hey, you know what?
Wow.
You want to play in my sandbox? I told him, send me the plot. Let me see what you got. Give me a couple sample chapters. I said, I'll edit this heavily, but if I like it. And he did. It was called 6 Days of the Dragon, excuse me. And so the second book in the series is an actual novel by a gentleman named Roman Leary, at which time I'm finishing up my other short stories. Ultimately, a couple of years later, we do another collection and another collection. So basically, right now, what you have at Amazon, aside from all the short little comic strips I've done of Brother Bones, Amazon has 6 Brother Bones titles. 2 of them are novels, the other 4 are collections.
Wow.
That's amazing. That story. First of all, can we give a shout out to all the Walking Dead men out here making
I know, seriously, right?
Everybody else. That is
yeah, he has an affinity for the Walking Dead men.
Kind of like the dead guys, That's amazing. That is amazing.
I love the idea again, and this all I riff off all the pulps that I've ever read. All right, and growing up as a kid, I grew up at the end of what you used to call the old cliffhanger movie serials.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so anytime I can swipe from that. All right, use it. So as each Brother Bones stories would open up, he's actually living in this upstairs apartment in this rundown tenement house in Cape Noir, right? And he's found himself a familiar, an aide, an assistant, what do you call it? A card dealer from a casino in Cape Noir, a young guy named Blackjack Bobby Crandall. And because Brother Bones saved his life, Crandall feels obligated to basically, do what he asks him, more like a chauffeur, and takes him around or whatever. And Bones moves into his apartment. He's got 2 bedrooms. So a lot of the stories open up where I say the dead man sat in the chair looking out the window. All right. Now on the bureau behind him is a candle. And when that candle lights on its own, it's the signal of the fates.
Wow.
And Bones will get up, leave the chair, go over to the candle, and there he sees the image of that teenage prostitute that he killed all those years ago, who now tells him what his next target is. He pulls open the drawer, and in the drawer is his bone mask and his 45s. Comes out into the kitchen where Bobby's probably, having breakfast or whatever, and says, "Get the car. We have a mission." And off they go. Right? But I call him the man who never dreams.
Wow.
You said that you were influenced by a lot of early pulp stories. Can you name some of the ones that influenced you early that sent you on your sort of writing path?
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, in the '70s, I found a lot of the classic pulps have been reprinted in paperback form in this country, and so I discovered a lot of the shadow, pulps uh, by Walter Gibson, which were an eye opener for me. I absolutely love those things. And then eventually, Bantam paperbacks came out with Doc Savage paperbacks by Lester Dent. All right, and writing under the pen name of Kenneth Robeson, and I read those like crazy. But it wasn't until after I'd gotten my comic career going. My comic career started around 1978, whatever, where I started selling short stories to a lot of small independent comic companies. And once that got launched, I didn't give much thought to the pulps at that particular time, but I was always aware of them and the fact that there was still a pulp fandom separated from comic fandom. Now, I was going to San Diego, I was doing Comic Cons or whatever, but I always had this itch to go to a pulp convention to see what they were all about. So finally, maybe now 25 years ago, I went to a pulp convention in Dayton, Ohio, and basically it was made up of like 100 vendors who were just selling all these old pulp magazines or facsimile reprints of those magazines. All right. They had, like I said, 100 vendors. During the entire weekend, they only had 60 attendees. I was in my mid 50s at the time and the youngest guy there.
Wow.
The average
Wow.
age of the attendees was like 75 to 80.
Oh, wow.
So it was like an eye opener for me to realize, if this doesn't change, this fandom is going to disappear real quick. All right. So I get back home from the con and call Rob, again, my artist buddy. All right. I mean, we'd hooked up about the same time we got into the comic field professionally. And I told Rob about my experience at the con, and his comeback to me is, so what do you want to do about that? And my answer was very simple. I said, maybe we can tap into our social network of comic book creators, artists, and writers and see if they'd like a shot at writing new pulp stories based on classic pulp characters from the 30s and 40s who have since gone into public domain. I knew immediately we weren't going to be able to touch the Shadow or Doc Savage or the Spider. Those licenses are constantly being renewed. They were moneymakers.
Right.
But people do not understand the hundreds of B characters that existed during the Great Depression in the pulps. And so I started finding, I went back to online booksellers who sold pulps and facsimiles and reprints and started picking up all the ones I could get that featured some of these, unknown characters like the Purple Scar or Secret Agent X or the Domino Lady. And the list just goes on and on. The Moon Man. I mean, they're amazing B characters. So the idea was, okay, we write new stories and we put them center stage. We start publishing novels and anthologies featuring all these B characters that the world has forgotten, and we bring them back. And then once we've established, an actual publishing company and have a few titles, we'll start going to these pulp conventions and seeing if we can convince a lot of these pulp fans or bring newer pulp fans, let's put it like this, into the market. Well, just the mere fact of reaching out to dozens of our pulp colleagues, our comic colleagues, they started finding an interest in pulps. They were as surprised as most people are, and they started joining us going to these conventions. The first con that we went to was in Lombard outside of Chicago. About 2 or 3 years after we started the company, we had 5 titles on our table. And the regular old-time pulp fans walked by our table and looked at me and Rob as if we were aliens with 3 heads. Okay, so they usually have a big dinner Saturday night at the convention, and so we're at the convention. I find myself sitting next to this gentleman again, probably in his 80s or whatever, right? And introduce myself and informally we're talking, waiting to get served the meal. And he goes, "Oh, you're the guys doing that new stuff, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that's us." I says, "Can I ask you a question?" He says, "Sure." I says, "Who's your favorite pulp character?" And trust me, all right, I got my fingers crossed under the table, all right, because now I'm starting to get an education in the history of pulps, and I'm boning up on getting to know a few of the characters. Well, the old guy turns around, looks at me, and without a hesitation goes, "Secret Agent X." Boy, did I breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, I looked at him and I says, "Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't there a total of 45 Secret Agent X magazines during his run?" He looks at me proudly and says, "Yes, and I have every single one of them." I says, "Well, good for you." And I said, "I bet you probably reread most of them many times over." "Oh, I have. I said, "All right. Well, I'm kind of, puzzled. Wouldn't you want to read number 46 if you could?" He just looked at me. He goes, Well, you're modernizing him. You're changing him." I said, "Who said that?" I said, "We didn't."
Right.
The caveat to all our writers and illustrators, I says, is they have to set them in the period they were created and appeared. I said, "I'm giving you the original Secret Agent X." I said, "In fact, we've got a new Secret Agent X anthology coming out within the next 2 or 3 months." And that was it. That we started to turn heads. Within a few years, not only were we accepted, but we had lots more titles on our table, and other of our old writing colleagues and friends and artist friends got the bug and started doing their own publishing companies and following suit and doing what we were doing with Airship 27. Moonstone Books out of Chicago started doing prose anthologies of the Phantom, the Lee Fox comic strip. And they did a prose anthology of Kolchak, the Night Stalker. The point being is they were doing what is now since become termed new pulp. And now if you go to Windy City or Pulp Fest in Pittsburgh, and Windy City happens in the spring, in, like I said, Lombard, Pulp Fest in Pittsburgh in the fall. And if you go to any of those cons now, they have been totally revitalized. We have college kids coming in there. We've got even high school kids bringing their girlfriends and whatever. And I mean, there's at least 20 to 25 publishers of new pulps out there today. I mean, Airship 27, from that first table with 5 books, our catalog on Amazon now has over 300 titles.
Wow. That's incredible.
I'm curious to know how much pushback you got from the old guard about, besides him. I mean, did you face other resistance?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were people. I mean, look, I'm where they were 20 years ago. Okay. I get the old grumpy old man thing. I live it, pretty much most of my life as well. The kicker is we have people literally walk up to the table and look at our books. All right. Pick them up and pretty much, just give us this ugly look, like,
wow,
and just drop it back on the table and walk away. All right.
Wow.
They honestly would have liked nothing better than for us to never come back.
Wow.
But that wasn't, in our nature. All right. Because again, we met enough people who were decent enough and friendly enough to engage in us in conversation and understand what we were doing. Primary one of all this was the 2 con promoters themselves, Doug Ellis and John Gunnison. All right. Well, John Gunnison for many, many years had a book selling business where he reprinted classic pulps from the 30s and 40s using today's, on-demand printing, desktop printing technology,
right,
to do literally those old magazines as brand new magazines. I mean, identical reprints, like, you know, you'd have picked up right off the kiosk back in 1933.
Wow.
And he'd had a flourishing business doing this for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So he and Doug, who were the promoters of the con, when they saw what we could bring to the community, I mean, by the end of that weekend, basically said, please, you guys are going to come back, right? You're going to come back. And we said, yeah, if you want us, we'll be back. So the following year we go back. And I think the following year we had maybe 8 or 9 titles on the table. But the kicker was that following year, sitting to my right, was a writer from Illinois named Van Allen Plexico, who was publishing his own pulp adventures on his own. And to the left, another guy named Wayne Reingold, who had heard about what we were doing and showed up with a table selling his own adventure pulps that he was writing, brand new characters. And that's when we knew it. There was an anchor here, okay? It was taking its course. Within, I think, 5 or 6 years, Doug was literally saving the vendor tables down the center aisle of the convention, both sides, for publishers of new pulp. And we were in the new pulp aisle. And we had become accepted. Now we're accepted. I mean, we even at Windy City, every Friday night, I mean, ultimately it was a case of, you know, several of the writers and participants, and I mean young guys, all right, were like, well, we should have some kind of a group, all right? We should, you know, form some kind of a organization or whatever, all right? Have a presence on the internet. Okay. From that, we devised a group called the Pulp Factory, hearkening back to the fact that the early pulps and even comics back in the Golden Age were produced in a factory type environment. All right. I mean, if you ever read the history of Golden Age comics, these guys would go in the studios. Somebody'd have a script, give it to somebody else who do pencils, who give it to somebody else who do inks, who give it to, and within a day you put out a 24-page comic just like that. It was factory, you know, boom, down the assembly line. Well, pulps were pretty much the same way. An editor might call one of his more reliable regular writers and say, hey, I need a 60,000 word Doc Savage adventure by Monday morning. And Dent would go off for the weekend and put it out. Now, Walter Gibson, at the height of writing The Shadow, was writing 2 novels a month. A month.
Wow.
He did this for like X number of years. They say he used to go to conventions, not conventions. He used to go to cocktail parties in Manhattan, right? And his fingertips were all taped up because they were hurting, pounding his old Smitten Corona. All right. And then when they heard about this, Smitten Corona literally made ads with his picture on it, saying the Shadow Writer uses our typewriter, you know. So
that's incredible.
His fingers would bleed. He would bleed for his craft.
That's incredible. That is incredible.
Bleeding for the craft. Stone, what do you got for him?
Yeah, so I was thinking about, basically you guys revitalized that entire thing. And now there's going to be new generations of people introduced to those characters, introduced to that form of writing, and they're going to get inspired and they're going to want to do similar things. When I looked on your website, I saw in the lecture part that you do adult seminars and children presentations. Did that come about from your desire to keep people aware that this art form exists and to get?
Well, it's only recently. I'll tell you what, Tombstone. It's only recently that I've done any kind of lecturing on the pulps themselves. Mm-hmm. What you saw on the website was that ultimately, when I finally broke into the comics as a professional, and this is a fun thing for me. Okay, I came into comics in the early 50s. All right. I was born, I'm a baby boomer. All right. My dad was in World War II, came home, married my mom in 45, year the war ended, and I was born in 46. And my dad got me hooked on comics by the time I was 5 years old. All right. First comic he ever gave me was a Kid Colt comic. Right? And I couldn't read it, but I could look at the pictures. All right. until eventually by 6 and 7, I was driving my mother crazy because I wanted to know what was in the word balloons. So she sat me down one day on the living room rug and gave me a dictionary and taught me how to use it. And once I could figure out what the words were, I knew what the characters were saying. Okay, so this love of comics at that early age and whatever. Okay, well, I get married, I have a family, I have my own kids, and the next thing you know, they're going to school, especially in the younger years, going to the grade schools, 3 or 4, and telling their teachers, my dad writes comic books. So, next thing you know, I'm getting a call going, Mr. Fortier, any chance you'd like to come into our class and talk to our 5th graders about comics? So I slowly put this informal little history of American comics together, all right, and started doing this for them. Well, I mean, this carried on, guys, until the point where I've got grandkids that I'm doing that for ultimately.
Wow.
And now they're all growing up and adults, all right? So that was the start of doing those kind of lectures. When Airship 27 got going, we were putting out some books that were being sold at Barnes and Nobles. And sure enough, I got a call from an assistant manager there that I knew personally. And she said, any chance you could come in and talk to people about pulps and their history? And I said, man, I would love to. So again, went back, did my homework, and went one night to Barnes and Nobles and gave like an hour lecture on the history of American pulps and their place in the history of literature and the culture of this country. So that's why it's up on the board. I love doing those kind of things. But the biggest rush I've ever had, I mean, when I came home from the service, I went to college for a couple of years, got disillusioned with school, ended up getting married, like I said, having a family. And because of those responsibilities, even though I was writing, trying to break into the comic business, I ended up getting a job at a local General Electric factory, which paid extremely well, had great health benefits, and would take care of my wife and my children. Okay. Well, over the years, time goes by, and I become a professional. I never gave up the day job. Right? Nothing I was going to ever do. And so while my career was taking off with doing the Green Hornet, Terminator, and all the other things that I've had the blast, the fun of doing, I'm still doing the General Electric thing until one night I walk into the factory, and as I'm punching the old clock, my foreman says, hey, they want you up in personnel. So I go up to personnel, and the girl says to me, she goes, so how old are you? I says, well, I am going to be 55 this November. And she goes, how long you been here? I said, 31 years now. She goes, would you like to retire with a full pension?
What?
Where is that piece of paper?
Right, let me sign.
Right, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Damn.
So then I'm retired, and basically it's my wife goes, you're going to do 2 things the rest of your life. And I said, what are those? She goes, you're going to take care of me and the family? And I went, yep, done deal. And she says, you're going to write your ass off. All right. And not worry about whether you sell or you get paid or nothing. Right. It's you do it because you love it. All right. So that's where I've been for the last, now we're going up. It's almost 25 years since we've been retired from there. And it's like having a second life, guys.
Yeah.
Moved out here to Colorado from New England approximately 18 years ago. And one of the things I discover in Fort Collins, where we live now, is this community college, Front Range Community College. And lo and behold, I find out that they have these night classes, these continuing education classes, if you will. And a friend of mine starts talking to me, one of my local comic book buddies. I introduced myself to the comic shop when we moved to town, and through them met other fans and writers and other people who've written and gotten published. And they were telling me, if you wanted to, you could probably teach a class there at night. And that was a bug that I'd had all those years after I got out of college. Never finished, didn't get a degree, and always wondered what the heck it would be like to teach. So sure enough, I went to the community college. I met the dean of the continuing education program. We sat down and talked. When she found out about my resume and how many years I'd been doing this professionally and everything else like that, she goes, So what are you thinking of doing? I says, how long do your classes run a night? So usually 8 weeks, usually 2 nights a week. I said, I'd like to teach a class on how to write comics and graphic novels for you if you'll have me.
What? No way.
So she says, hey, go home and write it up, send it to me, and we'll put it in the catalog for next semester. So for 2.5 years, I taught this night class at Fort Collins here, the community, and I taught 5 different classes, approximately 26 students. It was one of the greatest times of my life. I had a blast. It was an incredible experience, only because I had been doing this for so long. It was second nature to me. But to explain it to a novice, to somebody who loves comics but want to know how you do this, that whole point, okay? And so it forced me to make up a syllabus and to break the process down in my head, how script comes together, how a comic team comes together, what part do each member of the team play, what part does the editor play, what part does the inker play, what part does the letter. I found myself in teaching this class gaining a whole new experience for the media that I never had that deep before. All right, it's an incredible media, and it's amazing when a good comic is born, all the time and effort and sweat and blood that goes into making that happen. So another, notch on the belt. It was. Oh, and I have to tell you this because you guys will love this.
Okay.
First class, I have 5 students. We're getting close to the end of the 8 weeks, and every night I would send them home with homework, and they would have to write a script based on. I'd given them a format. I'd given them a short story I'd written digitally, and that's what they had to use. I'd shown them the format I wanted. I explained the whole breakdown of what a panel is, captions, balloons, all that good stuff. And I would give them an assignment of what to write. Right? Give me a horror story. Give me a Western. Write a story about meeting the most, important person in your life, etc. And as the weeks would go by, I'd get a little more complicated in the assignments. All right. And make them, reach outside themselves. I had one week where each of them had to write a 16-page story, but they only had to write the first 8 pages. When they came to class, the classes was like Monday and Wednesday night. So they left Monday night to write 8 pages, and they digitally sent me those. I printed them all out. Wednesday they show up at class, and I've got their 8 pages, and what I did was swap them around and gave them to another student.
That's
you go home and write the other 8 pages.
Oh, that's amazing.
Without being
that.
told what the plot is or where that writer wanted to go. And see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was always challenging them to stay creative. All right. So now I'm looking at the calendar, and I'm like maybe 2 weeks away from ending that first ever 8-week course. And I am so happy with all of these young guys and girls who did a great job. They were absolutely fantastic, attentive. We're really honing their skills as writers. And so came home, got online, and started reaching out to a lot of my artist friends and basically saying, hey guys, I'm teaching a class in how to write comics and graphic novels. And I've got these 5 amazing students that are really great. Towards my last, class, I'm going to ask them to give me an 8-page story, the best thing they've ever written. That's my challenge to them. I don't care what the genre is, but give me the best 8-page comic story you've ever written. I says, I'd like to get those illustrated professionally.
Wow.
Not let them know what's happening. And then when you guys finish with those stories, I'm going to collect them and we'll self-publish, and they'll be in a comic book of their own. And so basically they come to class that Monday night. I tell them the assignment. They go home. They come back Wednesday. And by then I'd sent out the stories. I'd read the stories. I'd critiqued them, fixed what I thought. Minor tweaks. There was nothing. They were great stories. I sent them to my artist friends. They come back Wednesday night. I showed up at the class with pizzas and sodas for everybody and basically gave them back their story, told them what I thought of them, how much I loved the work they'd done, and said, oh, by the way, just so you know, all right, 5 professional comic book artists are now illustrating your stories. I mean, the look on their faces, all right? I said, hang in there. I says, when the stories come in, I'm going to get them assembled. I'm going to find a local printer. We're going to make up a comic book, and we called it Front Range Tales for the college itself. The comics came in. We got together at a local coffee shop. I gave them their comics. They hit the roof. They were flying higher than kites.
I bet.
And
That's incredible.
And it literally became a habit for each of the succeeding 4 classes I did. We did 4 issues of Front Range Tales.
Wow. So, ladies
That's
and
incredible.
gentlemen, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. If you have an art, something you're passionate about, and you're trying to make sure it doesn't go into the dustbin of history, that's what you do. That's exactly what you do.
I love the media. I mean, my love of pulps is great. Don't get me wrong. Learning to do the short story form and challenging myself, because I mean, the majority of the last almost 50 years now has been writing comics. So when the whole pulp thing came along, it was a challenge for me to stretch my own creative muscles. All right, to see what I could do as a short story writer. And Brother Bones was a huge help in that regard. And then I started pushing it further and I've done a few pulp novels, right, full-length novels. But the kicker is, as much as I love writing novels, and I'm hoping, that I'll do, many more, as the good Lord will allow me to, but I can't get away from comics. Comics are my first love. I have such a passion for it. And again, it's only grown with time and experience, and to the point where, and I tease people about this now, but you guys will die laughing. At the height of my career, all right, when I was, really, really producing, the most projects I ever had to be working on at a single time was 3 different books. Like a monthly schedule, okay?
Yeah.
And that was the height of like when I was working with Now Comics. I was writing a monthly Green Hornet, and then I was writing a monthly Terminator for them. At the same time, I was writing a series for Caliber Press, an alternate world adventure called The Boston Bombers. Okay. As of today, I am currently involved with 7 different comics.
Damn.
It's insane, guys. It's
insane.
Crazy.
That's wild.
Insane. It's insane.
I'm retired.
When
I'm
you
supposed to be retired,
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, not to add on to your workload or anything like that, but are you still teaching, and can I take your class?
No, I am no longer teaching. Like I said, I did it for 2 years, and towards the end, it was a sad thing. I.e., the college was geared pretty much to what they did as far as young kids out of high school and their associate's degrees and whatever, and for the day program. All right. Mm-hmm. The night school got very, very little support or whatever. And honestly, I mean, just to show you, during the second year, the most I ever had in one class was 8 students. It usually was about 4 or 5. And I kept asking, Lori, the woman in charge of the night school program, if there was any way we could get any kind of advertising put up posters in the student union, whatever. Because, college kids love comics. And the more so, the word never got out. The word never, ever got out. So after 2 years, again, busy with my own projects, busy with my own life, my family, and my, other obligations. Yeah. I said, okay, you know what? I scratched that itch. It was fun. I'd love to go back and do it again, but I would like to have a lot more support. We have a local once a year convention here in Fort Collins, and I usually have a table there. And at that table, I would talk to people who would talk about, how do you do this and whatever. And my wife sitting next to me would talk about the classes that I had. And these were kids that went to this college and they never, ever heard of it, ever. So.
Wow.
That's crazy.
It's like pushing the rock up the hill. Nobody was giving us any support.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
It's hard to do that without the support.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is. And I mean,
I want to.
Look ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you a question, just because, I've explored teaching myself, and I don't think I have found very many things more fulfilling than teaching. And so to hear your experience with that, I think one of the more enlightening things about teaching is learning how different types of people learn and how many different types of learning that people have. Everyone learns different visually, touch, reading, whatever, and then having to adjust your curriculum to fit those learning styles.
I mean, as I did each succeeding course, all right, I got to be a little bit more comfortable with the salient points that I knew I had to get across, the fundamentals, if you will, of what I wanted these students to understand and walk away from. And part of this came from, we're talking about lectures and whatever, an experience that Rob and I had together prior of this. This goes back a few years. Rob and I were contacted by a professional group of fiction writers, the Oklahoma Fiction Writers Organization. Okay, it's made up of like 800 professional writers from Oklahoma, and once a year they have this conference, and their committee basically goes out and finds people to either have workshops or give lectures or whatever. All right. Well, ever since the day of the Marvel movies and all this good stuff, and people started going crazy over comics and graphic novels, a lot of these professional writers found themselves being bugged by their New York publishers about, can you write a graphic novel for us? Can you write a graphic novel? At which point, and they had no clue how to write a graphic novel. Okay. Right. So they were bugging their committee. Can you get us some guys, here at least at one of the conferences? That's what we'd like to have. Okay. Well, a member of the committee had a cousin who happened to be a friend of mine and Rob's, all right, a comic book fan that we were hooked up with on Facebook. And he gave them our names and contact. Lo and behold, Rob and I get a call. Would you gentlemen like to come down to this conference in a couple of months? And we'll fly you down. We'll put you up. All expenses paid. All we ask is that you give us 2 90-minute workshops during the course of the weekend, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. All right. So Rob and I are talking, and we had just finished publishing our own Dracula's Daughter graphic novel. As you recall, I talked about writing, a vampire story a while back at the start of this discussion. And we had self-published that, and we were selling it via Amazon. So Rob and I are talking, and I said, well, we'll do the the workshop based on the graphic novel. What do you think? And he said, yeah, that makes sense. He said, how do you want to break it up? I said, well, it has to be a 90-minute workshop. So I'll speak the first 30 minutes on, the art of writing comics. Then Rob said, okay, I'll do a slide presentation showing your script and the accompanying pages that I did interpreting that script from the graphic novel. I said, right. And he said, then we'll both use the last 30 minutes as a question and answer period for our audience. I said, hey, sounds good.
Yeah.
So, okay. So basically, we're all set. We get back to the conference people. They know we're coming. They're advertising us as part of that year's conference. And we're about 2 weeks away from going when it dawns on me one night, and I call Rob because, like, I live here in Colorado. Rob's a Missourian. I call Rob and I say, hey, you've got as much time in this business as I do. He goes, yeah, we're both about 45 years now. I said, right. So I said, we're going to basically take 90 years of experience and boil that down to 90 minutes. And these people are going to hear us talk. And then I have to imagine halfway home, they're going to forget half the things we told them.
Yep.
And Rob went, yeah, you're probably right. He said, but I don't see how we can change that. I said, well, we were planning on, bringing extra copies of Daughter Dracula. We were going to print a whole bunch of them up before the conference and sell them in the hall outside, the lecture hall. I says, how hard would it be for you to take my script and print that? And boy, Rob lit up. He goes, you know what? He goes, we'll make it a book. He says, Dracula's Daughter, the script by Ron Fortier. He said, I'll pepper it with panel illustrations from the graphic novel. And all right, so we did. We published that at Amazon. And we went down to the conference with both Daughter Dracula, the graphic novel, of Dracula's Daughter, and Dracula's, Daughter, the script. And we had both those on the table outside. The idea being, if you pick up both of them, okay, you can take the graphic novel and be reading it and come across a page that you find particularly intriguing, the way Rob drew it, the layout, the panel composition, but then say to yourself, I wonder how Ron wrote that. Pick up the script, go to that page and see how I laid it out, what my exposition was, what I told Rob to do, how Rob interpreted, and flip it around. You can do the same thing. You can read the script, get to a page in the script and go in your head seeing, what I'm describing and asking Rob to do, but then pick up the graphic novel and actually see what Rob did. So it becomes a 2-volume How to Make Comics or Graphic Novels.
Immensely useful too. I could see that's incredible.
Well,
That's incredible.
I go every convention I do, I literally have to reorder copies of both. And I have them side by side on my table. I sell them for $10 each. And the minute somebody will pick up the Dracula's Daughter, all right, it's got a very suggestive cover on it, all right,
Right.
and they'll flip through it, right, and basically see Rob's beautiful artwork and get taken by it. But then I'll turn around and say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in knowing about comics, that's the script to that. And boy, do their eyes light up. And suddenly, and I've even sold just the script. That
I
some
love
people
that.
just want to know how to do this, and they go nuts. They'll just buy the script to see what the format is. All right. So, going back, Greydon, to what you're talking about teaching, that conference was the beginning of my formalizing that whole concept of how do you teach people how to do comics? Because I opened both workshops, all right, with an audience full of professional prose writers. And what I told both audiences and what I would tell my students at the comic, the school, at the community college, is simply this. Okay, if you are going to write comic books, then I am going to ask you to leave your ego at home. All right, leave it there. All right, I mean, put it away. Because if you're one of those writers who are so in love with your words, then go write a short story or go write a novel, but do not write comics because it's not about your words. I hate to burst your bubble. It's about the art. All right.
That's right.
This is a merger of two sensibilities, literate and visual. All right. If you're at a comic convention, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody's going to the artist table.
Facts.
9 out of 10, that's where they go. And guess what? So would I. That's why I fell in love with comics. All right. Right. So you want to write comics? All right. Then what your goal should be is to write the best story you can write with the fewest words possible. You are building a skeleton. Your artist is going to put on the musculature, the veins, the blood, whatever. And if you work in tandem, if you have both the same goal, the same wanting to make this the best story you can make it, you'll end up with a comic book people will read and remember and love. But again, it's not about, and so it was a big part of when I was teaching the class, making my students understand that. All right. I said, basically write a script, And when you're done with it and you're happy with it, then go back and take out 50% of the words you put there. Okay? Because I can guarantee you
Wow.
put way too many.
Yes.
Every word you put in a word balloon that doesn't belong there takes away from the art, takes away from that limited space the artist has to work. And trust me, guys, I have seen professionals. I've seen professional comic book artists who don't get this, all right, who write the most verbose scripts, okay? And an artist will draw a panel, right, trying to follow what they're saying, but then it goes to a poor letterer
Oh man.
who's got to put like 20 word balloons in a caption, and suddenly half the art's gone.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a comic book, guys. Like I said, you're a frustrated, novel writer. Okay. I mean, I'm saying this, and it's me teaching myself. One of the first things, one piece of great advice I got when I first made this whole community college thing happen was I have a good friend who's a retired professor from New York, and I wrote him a meeting and said, hey, I'm going to be teaching a class, and blah blah blah. And this guy taught for like 35 years before he retired. And this is what he wrote back to me. He said, Ron, he goes, I'll tell you the secret of being a good teacher. And I said, what's that? He says, don't be afraid to learn from your students.
Bars.
Bingo.
That's
Bingo.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bingo.
Wow.
Open yourself up.
I feel like I should be paying tuition for this lecture, to be completely honest with you. I just been sitting here with my notes. It's like, you don't teach anymore, but you teaching us right now.
A lot.
Anyways. But yeah, I mean,
let me ask you this question.
Go.
You talked about I want to go back to some more of Brother Bones for a second here. This world that you describe, I know it's in this sort of classic noir type of setting, and I think the only reference point I have for that, honestly, I remember when the Shadow movies were sort of remade in the 90s and stuff, but I think Dick Tracy is like the only thing that and I don't even know if that falls into pulp. That might not even fall into that.
Well, I don't know.
Does it?
Yeah, it does in a broad, exaggerated way. Yeah, it does. I mean, more. Well, go back to Chester Gould's newspaper strip of Dick Tracy. Okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
that definitely has its roots in the Great Depression and in the pulps. Okay. And Gould, I think, was one of the great geniuses in realizing that your hero is only as good as your villains. And ultimately, why Dick Tracy was such a great success was how innovative he was in creating these macabre villains.
Yeah.
That he went after. Okay. And then, you get a glimpse of that in that modern movie they made. All right. But people reading the daily strips, I mean, we're seeing some of the most gruesome, ridiculous, bizarre, freakish villains that Dick Tracy. And that's all pulp. That's pure pulp.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Warren Beatty, sort of not remake, but like imagining in the 90s or whatever.
Oh,
a lot of people give that movie crap.
If you take it with a grain of salt and you have fun with it, it's a blast. Believe me, okay? Because I mean, Cape Noir. I talk about Brother Bones. Cape Noir, arguably, the greatest other character that I envisioned for Cape Noir was one of Topper Wild's chief lieutenants, a debonair playboy guy named Harry Beast, Beest. Okay, so now this is a subplot that took off on its own, and sometimes when you write, that can happen. Okay,
Yes.
Remember I said I did 7 stories in that original anthology. Okay, and Beast became one of my readers' favorite characters. Because literally, Wild has a college-age daughter, Alexis. Okay, he's a widower, and she means the world to him. But she has the hots for Harry, and keeps teasing him every chance she gets. Whereas he knows if he touches her, deflowers the boss's, little princess. Okay, I mean his neck's in the noose. Okay,
Right.
Well, ultimately, that does happen, and the boss finds out about it. Now, also in Cape Noir, because you can't do this kind of thing. I've told people before, you have to understand the whole concept of the Bones world in Cape Noir is Universal's 1940s horror movies merged with Warner Brothers gangster movies.
Great.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Well, another of Wile's associates is a mad scientist named Dr. Bagosi. So when Weil finds out that Harry has seduced his precious little daughter, he has him drugged, taken to Dr. Bagosi to do it whatever he wants to do with him.
Wow.
Well, Bagosi is experimenting on transferring brains. So he literally gets a silverback gorilla from the zoo, cuts out its brain, and puts Harry's brain into the body of a silverback gorilla. And now Harry Beast is an actual
beast.
Right. But he's still Harry. He manages to escape, find some of his old friends who aren't scared to death of him in his new figure, right? And literally reforms his own mob. And now he's the gorilla mobster Harry Beast.
Oh, my, that's so dope.
I love it. I love it.
So
I like naming things. That's a great name.
Yeah.
Well, it was perfect. You just got it right. So it was like, it was the setup. Okay, it's just, you don't know where this particular plot's going. But trust me, once he becomes the gorilla mobster, I so many fans are like, give us another B story. Give us another B story. All right, yeah, okay, sure, glad to. Okay, I mean, it's just like it's so much fun to play with. Okay, because again, if you do your homework and you know these facts, gorillas are vegetarians.
Yes.
So he can't eat steak anymore, and it makes him sick. All right. So I mean, he lives on a diet of vegetables and bananas. Okay, right, and he smokes these cigars. He had to have his Tommy gun fixed so his fingers could fit in the digits or whatever, right? But yeah, he's still in Cape Noir as a gangster, okay? And there's one particular story where he and Bones actually cross paths, and Bones almost takes him out, but something happens and Bones lets him live. And he's way too good a character for me to get rid of anyways, all right? But it worked to the plot, and Bones just let him go, i.e. thinking that he's suffering enough in the torment the way he lives as it is now, So there you go.
Wow. It's something about that it's world building that has a this habit of being able to branch off into other IPs. If that world is interesting enough, if the characters in there have great relationships with the other co-characters in there, there's just a bunch you can do with that. And that sounds amazing.
Right. I mean, once characters start coming to life to you as the writer, I mean, the potential that they have, you didn't see going into this thing, all right? And then that's what happens. I mean, just recently, I told you there are actually 2 novels in the series. Well, the second novel is that after writing the Bone stories and Beast as a character and whatever, okay, for about 9 years, I found myself one day sitting at the typewriter thinking about the fact that the whole concept with what happened to Harry Beast was basically told in like about 3 paragraphs. And then he was full-fledged, and he was that character I was using, all right. As the gorilla gangster. And the more I kept thinking about it, I found myself saying, you know what? This needs to get fleshed out.
This is a fleshed out story. Yes.
The whole. Yes. Yeah. So I ended up over a period of 6 months writing a prequel novel that I called Cape Noir, Beauty and Beast story. And it's basically the entire story of Harry and Alexis and Topper Weil, and you meet the Bone brothers, the Bonello brothers, in this. But in where this takes place, it's almost 20 years before Brother Bones comes on the scene.
Right.
So it was like going back and setting the stage. So it's the prequel before And when I, people ask me, how do you read the books in order? I tell them, well, get a hold of Cape Noir first. It's the story of Harry Beast. You'll get introduced to the Bone Brothers, and then pick up the anthology collection, Brother Bones, the Undead Avenger. But I finally gave Harry his due.
That's amazing, because I'm
awesome.
literally in the middle of doing exactly that now with a character having to go back and even though he had the little structure of an origin, fleshing the origin out into a full-fledged story.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how very similar that process is for almost every other writer that I've heard that does that. Like, it's inspiring.
Well, the character's become so popular ever since I brought him onto the scene and started writing his adventures, that in the last 10 years, with maybe a gap of 2 or 3 years between, I literally had 2 independent film companies option to do a Brother Bones movie. Unfortunately, one of them got as far as casting.
Wow.
And looking for scenes, but they just couldn't get the funding, and that's why both didn't materialize. But again, so there is an appeal to the character. I don't ever try to get ahead of myself with any of this again, and we'll go back to it again. I love what I do. I love the characters that I create, but again, it's the big man. Okay, he gets all the credit. I mean, I'm just using a gift he gave me, hopefully to entertain people, so that I'm always caught up short, guys, when the impact of what I've written, affects other people to a degree that I'm not expecting. Okay, and I mean, one of those was Joe. All right, himself. I had years ago wrote a short, 6-page Brother Bones strip that we were going to use in a black and white anthology. And Joe and I know each other. Like I said, we belong to a group of comic creators here in Fort Collins, and we all get together like once a month at the local comic shop. It has a cafe, and the guys hang around, show their artwork. I talk about comic projects I'm working on and whatever. It's such a fun, informal group. We all charge each other up every time we have one of these little get-togethers. Mm-hmm. And so I asked Joe, I said, would you be willing to do this short strip based on my pulp character, Brother Bones? And, showed him some samples from the illustrations Rob had done in the books. And Joe went and did this 6-page Brother Bones strip called Needle Justice. And he did a great job. He did an awesome job with it. Oh, yeah. And it was published in this black and white anthology comic. Okay. Well, I really didn't get how much Joe liked the character until a little over a year ago. We're at another convention in Denver, and we're sitting across the aisle from each other, right? And Joe says to me, hey, you got anything going, Ron? And so I told him, I said, well, I said, I finally wrote a graphic novel script detailing the entire origin of Brother Bones. It's 130 pages long. And, I'm really guessing Joe's going to say, well, that's nice. Okay. It's like, 130 pages. No way he's going to say anything else.
I'm not touching that.
No, but he just looks at me out of the blue. Brother Bones, I like that character. He goes, can you send me the script?
Of course.
I told him, I said, hey, Joe, don't jerk me around, please. Okay. I mean, this thing's been collecting dust in my files now. I've already scared off another 3 or 4 artists. So no, I like the character. Send me the script. All right. Convention's over. I get home. I digitally send him a copy of the script. And I don't think it's more than a day. He gets back to me. He goes, yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa.
I do want to ask you about that. So that's a massive undertaking, like 130-page screenplay into a 4-issue novel series. Like what's that process like to split it up like that into the narrative? The reason I ask is because when we first did our extra pay and entropy comic book, I had been reading comic books since I was like 8, but being on the production side is completely different than being a fan consuming it. So when I started writing it, and me and Gray was putting the stuff together, it was very verbose. We thought this was one book. It turned out to be 3, right? It was actually 3, right? So what was your process? How did you know how to cut it off? Like I said, that's a lot. That's a big narrative.
That's his challenge. Okay, that's really his challenge. My thing was, again, what I took. Well, I actually took the first 2 written Brother Bones stories. All right, the first was Brother Bones, the Undead Avengers, and the second was a thing called Brother Bones, the Shield and the Claw, and basically it's about a mobster who who's the law, the district attorney has somebody who's an eyewitness and is going to turn on top of Wild and his organization, and they're keeping him hidden in a safe house someplace. All right. Well, they've got a crooked cop working for them, and the mobster gets Dr. Bugosi to give him a drug that turns him into a werewolf to take out this informant. And that was the second story, right? The Shield and the Claw.
Okay.
All right. Well, what I did was I wrote the script and incorporated that into the origin story. By changing dates and sequences, I ended up with what, again, working with those film people would have been a nice 90-minute film.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the movie script. I adapted it into a comic form after the second film thing didn't succeed, because I figured I'll probably have a better chance of turning this into a graphic novel.
Right.
And lo and behold, that's what's happening now. When Joe came on board and read it and said he wanted to do it, I basically said, well, look, I'm going to tell you right now, any way you want to do this, you're the artist. Again, per what we've been talking about here, how comics are created and whatever, all right?
Right.
I've given you a skeleton. However you want to break that up and put it out there to the world, I'm just going to support it, whatever your call is. So, Joe, I mean, go ahead and fill them in.
So after reading a 130-page script and thinking about it for a while, just trying to breaking it up into 4 pieces, I figured that would be close to 30-ish pages per book, or somewhere around a normal comic book would be about 24 pages. So I was thinking they could just be a little bigger. The plan was to kind of hit key points in the story. So the first issue will end with kind of a horror type of aspect along the lines with what Ron was already saying for the story in general.
Right.
And then the second issue will actually be to when the monastery is sacked. And then there will be a transition at the end of the third story, which will become kind of the big introduction for Bones. And then the final book will be pretty much just Brother Bones in all his glory. But each book, since I was shooting for about 24 pages, 24 to 30, to actually put them out with the comic form, you need to have multiples of 4. So I was looking to do something more like a 40-page book, and then I'm getting supplemental work from others in order to fill it in. But that also introduces Bones in earlier in order to have him part of the story. So it's not just the mobster story with a little bit of horror. It actually is all encompassing. So I thought those would be some good spots to cut it apart, and then eventually we'll probably look to get the full trade out as well, but we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I pitched that to Ron, be like, hey, how about we split it up into 4 issues, and showed him where I was thinking. And then we are getting a certain page count for the extra stories as well in order to hit that 40-page mark, or however many extra we're going to do, because I'm also going to supply some extra background work, so thumbnails, a little bit of Ron's script, kind of like he was saying with the educational material before, for the classes and stuff like that. So I'm going to have my actual thumbnails laid out, and then I'll have some script right by it so you can kind of compare and contrast, and then some of the character designs and some of the other pieces that we're having worked on. And our Kickstarter is, I think, just past 60% right now. And hopefully we'll keep it going. We'll keep the momentum going. We have a bit over a week left, and we'll see on all that. I'm still wanting to work on the project regardless. And once we get this issue done, push to the next one, and then start working and push to the next one after that, and get all 4 done. So that way we can put out as much. But I'm really looking to over deliver in general.
Yeah.
One of the things that Joe brought out to me when we sat down and he explained this concept of breaking it down into 4 parts, right? Which I thought was fine. Okay, I mean, you're the guy who's going to be drawing, all these pages one after the other, right? That's what you want to do. But this is what he turns around and says. And again, I mean, his enthusiasm for the project is really what fed my own eventually. In that he said, well, he says I have a lot of. I've been working on other comic projects. I've made my own network of other artists. And he says, would you be willing to give us, like we did that early 6-pager all those years ago, would you be willing to give me short Brother Bone strips that I'll have these other artists draw, illustrate, letter, whatever, and we'll have it as a bonus in the back of each of the 4 chapters? And I went, I love that idea. I think that's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
On top of everything else. So you get the main story, and then you get a self-contained little short Brother Bones adventure. Okay. Well, I'm talking with Rob Davis on a weekly basis from what we do with the pulp, Airship 27 production. And Rob starts asking me how the Brother Bones project's going, and I'm telling him this, and he goes, "Hey, I'll do your first 6-pager."
Nice.
I said, you will? He says, yeah. He says, and tell Joe if he wants an alternate cover, I'll do an alternate cover for him too.
Nice.
So issue number 1 is going to have the main part by Joe, Joe's work, with lettering by Mike Belcher, a really good friend of ours. I've worked on several projects with Mike, and he's a top-notch letterer, aside from being a gifted artist in his own right. So that's the main part of the book. Then you've got this 6-part Brother Bones story called Nowhere to Hide, which Rob has finished and done completely by himself. It looks absolutely fantastic. And multiple covers. Joe can tell you more about, what's available at different tiers. But I mean, I was really taken aback when I realized he's offering our fans and people out there a book. I mean, a minimum of 40 pages, or a minimum, most likely we get closer to 50, I think, by the time we're done, for $10.
Yeah.
Come on.
Pretty
folks.
good.
I mean,
Wow. Can't beat that. Yeah.
That value.
Yeah. You can't beat that.
Absolutely. I have one. I know we're crossing over about an hour and a half, a little bit over. So I want to be cognizant of your time. But I have a question about the world of noir and why it's such an intriguing world to not only write for, but I guess, struck to draw for. What are your thoughts on the fact that that is a style of world that we tend to come back to even in the modern age?
Well, it harkens back to what I was talking about at the start of all this, that whole concept of what storytelling is all about. And to me, good storytelling, when you eventually boil it all down, literally comes to this constant cosmic struggle between good and evil. And when you create cities like Cape Noir, you're basically establishing that basic world that on the surface looks like it's a modern world. Fine. But when you add the elements of corruption, what you're doing is playing to a more primal human passion of savagery. Have we become civilized? Are we civilized?
Right.
I mean, if we can still commit crime, if we can still butcher each other on the streets, we're sending men to the moon. And there are those of us who walk the face of this earth who are no better than Attila the Hun soldiers.
That's so true.
So
true.
So put that in a setting that underscores that, okay? I mean, you put that, in a modern, clean, beautiful metropolis, and it's a counterpoint that it doesn't work. It doesn't give it weight. But the minute you make it a dingy, decrepit, like I said, crime-riddled environment, then that becomes atmosphere that makes your stories 10 times more powerful with a much stronger punch.
And that's why Batman
Wow.
works so well. Because
Exactly.
Gotham is a shitty town. It's a shitty town.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there are good people in it. And
Right.
that's who Batman fights for. And like it or not, that's Brother Bones, cosmic, assignment now. He needs to protect those good people who live in, and we do meet some of them in the stories. All right. Some of the cops that I've used reoccur. Some of the detectives that appear in the story are good people trying to fight the good fight. And whether they're creeped out by Bones or not, he's definitely on their side,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Struck. What's your thoughts on drawing Brother Bones and the world that he exists in?
I definitely prefer. You can be a little more loose with it, and like the older architecture. I'm not a master in any of that, but it is definitely a little more fun. It can be more boxy, but you can go a little more elegant with it. Like we have a part in a casino that's really elegant versus some of the back alley scenes where it's just garbage on the ground just everywhere.
Right.
But like the characters with the suits and all that, like I'm okay with doing the superhero thing, but I really like there to be something a little extra. So like with Majestic, I want to have a little more variety and not just skin tight spandex for everybody.
Right.
So
Right.
kind of that street level really appeals to me much more, with people wearing actual clothes and actually like having to commute and go places and all this stuff. So I think the street level thing just works a lot better for me, and that is usually with the noir. It is going to be street level because it is guns and mobsters, and
Right.
with the horror you get a little more ephemeral with it. But yeah, I definitely enjoy it. I'm more of a fantasy and maybe like a dark urban type of enthusiast than per se with the regular comic shtick.
I think I got something for you too in that regard. But
Yeah.
the other question I have is, what I noticed is that the city that Brother Bones operates in is almost a character in and of itself. Do you find that to be a very important element of the entire story writing process, to make the environment, the setting, almost like its own character?
Oh, definitely. I mean, anything I've ever written, short stories and whatnot, basically works to the story as an element, as a strong element, and then becomes that character. All right. Cape Noir, to me, has a dangerous feel to it as such. And if I describe it properly when I'm writing my short stories and whatnot, hopefully that sense of dread comes across to the reader, so that you get why Brother Bones exists there. And hopefully it also engenders in my readers empathy for the good people of Cape Noir, who are just
Right.
trying to survive against the various mobs and criminal element. So that, I mean, I think one time we did a story, in fact, a comic story, where a young 12-year-old girl had been kidnapped, and Brother Bones ends up being the one who finds her and saves her from the mobsters who kidnapped her. So it's those kind of elements that Cape Noir is not a place you ever want to go and live. The
Right.
people who do live there, the honest people who run businesses and stores and drive the taxis and again the churchgoers and whatever, find themselves economically prisoners of the city. They can't leave. They can't just pack up and move and go live in a sunshine state like Florida. So
Right.
that's their prison, and you get that sense. But in his own way, in his own dark and gruesome way, it's basically the case of you've literally trained your pet wolf to eat the other wolves.
Yeah.
It's crazy, because I was thinking about the city being its own sort of character as well, and it's also the nuance in which you're writing the Brother Bones character is that at least from my perspective, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm eager to do so, is that he's a bad guy, but he's not evil. There's still redeemable qualities about him, and it's his journey from, okay, now he's this undead Avenger, but his story arc now is the redemption through that circumstance.
Exactly.
Am I accurate?
Exactly. I mean, you asked me a question earlier about, you know, how much does my faith influence me? One of the collections, and I don't recall offhand which one it is, one of the later collections, all right, it got me to thinking about how people can be oblivious, really, to the wonders of this world, the wonders of the universe, the beauty that's all around them, the miracle that what life really is, and just don't understand that. And okay, that's their loss. I consider it. But what I don't appreciate is the fact that sometimes people of faith are persecuted and ridiculed because they do have that faith. And that inspired me to write a story called The Godless, whereby a certain prisoner, who's a certain gangster whose kid brother has been caught and is going to the electric chair, all right, is so mad at the city and the people and everything else that the day after his brother is electrocuted, he decides he's going to get back at all of Cape Noir. And how does he do that? He and his gunmen break into an early morning Catholic mass and shoot up the place, pretty much like what's in the news today. I wrote this thing like 5 years ago, okay?
Right.
Because that's his frustration, okay? That's his frustration that there's no such thing as God. And he leaves the pastor wounded. Okay. Well, shift gears. Within 24 hours, there's that dead man sitting in his chair in that cold water flat. And the candle lights up, right?
Right.
And the candle, the voice of the girl tells him what's happened and where this gangster mob is hiding. Okay. And sure enough, Bones goes there and just blows them all apart. The final scene in the story, all right, is the old priest is in ICU. He's going to survive 3 or 4 bullet wounds. But, I mean, a lot of his parishioners are dead. And he's sitting there. And the lights dim a little bit. The door opens up. And Brother Bones walks in. And the priest looks at him. Right? Holy smokes, right? Bones, what are you doing here? And Bones looks at him and says, I just wanted to let you know it's been taken care of, Padre. And he starts to walk out, and the priest says, what do you mean it's been taken care of? He said, well, Butch didn't believe in God. I proved them wrong. And he walks out the door. And that's the story's called The Godless.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's
heavy.
pretty wild. Yeah, no, for sure. My last question I guess I have for you is I'm assuming that most of the stuff that you write now is within your own sort of worlds. Do you have any consideration these days of writing in other people's worlds, or are you sort of retired from that at this point?
Not really. I would go back to the Green Hornet in a heartbeat if I had the opportunity. All right. I mean, that's what launched my real career after all the small independent stuff I'd done. But almost 3 years I did writing that character was a great deal of fun. And again, like I said, it launched my career. They're fantastic characters, and I had a ball working there, and I'd love to go back to do that again. I also do other projects where other people come to me looking for me to help them round things out. I'm currently doing a 4 or 5 graphic novel saga, spy thriller, that was brought to me by an artist named Cesar Feliciano, who had this concept of a modern day spy thriller called Gin and Tonic. And it's about 2 assassins.
I saw that on the website.
It's about,
I saw that on the website.
Right. And so basically he had the plot, but he needed a writer to flesh it out. and working together over several phone calls that lasted well over hours long, we together shaped what this could be. And now I've written the first 3 graphic novels. The first one's been published. Let's see if I'll hold it up so your friends can see it.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. 1 second.
There it is. That's Gin and Talk.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's really dope.
Now that's me fleshing out what somebody else did and getting to work with them. And to me, again, that's the fun of comics. All right. It's the work with things. Now, just today, all right, if you've looked at my resume, you will know that years ago, one of the first comics I ever wrote was a Popeye comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to write the origin of Popeye.
Right.
And the artist on that book was Ben Dunn from Texas, the guy who runs Antarctic Press.
Mm.
You know, he's been around all that. Antarctic Press is still going strong. He's the guy who created Warrior Nun. That ultimately became a series on Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, today I'm on Facebook, and one of Ben's biggest sellers these days and what the company produces is his own version of Supergirl, a thing called Tomorrow Girl.
Mm.
Okay. Well, somebody had posted a pinup they did of Popeye meeting Tomorrow Girl. And Ben was so taken with it. Ben was so taken with it, he posted it on Facebook with the words, "This would make an interesting crossover." Okay, well, my mind just the minute I saw that, I just had to chuckle, and I posted under it. I said, Ben, I said, I'm willing to write this only if you're willing to draw it, because my thing is I'll just go to my long boxes, whip out that book that I wrote over 45 years ago, and pick up where we left off.
Right.
with our Popeye meeting his Tomorrow Girl.
Oh man. Wow.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing that not only on your Wikipedia, but like in the other interview I think we were both in, you had mentioned that and how they gave you the freedom to write lore and canon. And I mean, it's like anytime you get a chance to write canon for an established character, I mean, I'm taking that.
You gotta take it. You got to.
Well, yeah,
Gotta take that.
if you have an honest respect for the property and the people who created it, who came before you, and you don't mess with that, then yeah, hey, put your footprint on it, and hey, you deservedly so.
Yeah, what we did for ours is we actually wrote up a framework for ours so that if anyone was to write within our sandbox, they would have to essentially be familiar with our framework and sort of things that we are, our writing reality allows. So yeah. It's really cool. But
I do have one thing I wanted to compliment Ron on. So I read Terminator: The Burning Earth, and I was talking to Gray about it earlier. By the time I got finished reading it, I felt like I had been part of that whole war. And it reminded me a lot of when I watched the last Matrix movie out of the trilogy. And how by the third act, I'm exhausted because I felt like I was in that scene. That's what that book did for me. I felt at the end of it, I felt like I had went through all of the loss, all of the close calls, all of that stuff. That to me is very rare that a comic book gets that from me. So there's been a couple of Jonathan Hickman ones, but that I got that from that.
Thank you.
It's really well done.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. That's really, really kind of you, sir. Really, sincerely. That was a unique opportunity for me, and it came out of left field. Working with Alex Ross, his first ever comic book work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the work he did on that. I mean, I knew the story. I knew what I wanted to tell, but I mean. Again, it's that synergy that we're talking about here, okay? I mean, I think the story was good, but man, what he did with it. All
Yeah.
right, it's just, and you're speaking of that result, okay? I
Yeah.
mean, I got the same rush when I'd see those pages come back. All right, it's like I wrote that. I mean, he would add layer and layer of emotion in what he was drawing, and that's what you can't write. Okay,
Yes.
you can have a battle sequence or whatever, but to show a character haggard, weary,
Right.
drained, that's your artist.
Yeah.
All right. And Ross is a master. He's,
100%.
no ifs, ands, and buts. So thank you. I appreciate the kind
Yeah,
words.
man.
sincerely.
I love
And
it. No, go ahead, Greg.
I was just gonna say that you were getting those pages back via fax, right?
Yeah. black and white grayscale fact.
That's crazy.
And even
Yo.
then, and
Crazy.
even through that, you could tell. All right. That and he was a kid at the time. He was just out of art college. And man, I mean, I told my wife, this guy is going to shake up this industry like never before. Never.
He did.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I was there. I was in that spot. Hallelujah. Wow.
I always have to limit myself because I could ask questions forever. I have one more question, and I'll always have one more question forever.
All right. And
But
we'll let
I
it
remember
go.
one time.
We'll let it go. Okay. This will
Yeah,
be
this is
it.
your fourth
All right,
last
all right.
question.
This will be it right here. You had there was a comment you had made in an interview about the imagination of the reader doing the heavy lifting when it comes to like reading panels, and how that is sort of the magic of comics. Do you remember making that comment, and what do you have to say as far as how you feel about that today?
What happened? We were at a convention. This was like one of the earliest things that I ever done. I did an urban vigilante called Street Fighter for a small company out of Rhode Island, and we were down there one weekend debuting the comic, and it was a Sunday, probably a slow news days, if you will, because the local TV network sent their reporters down, and this one young lady comes over to me and asks me about comics and about what's so important about comics, and I began explaining to her the magic of what comics are. All right, i.e., if you read a book, it's just so many words, and your imagination develops all the imagery and the pictures
Right.
as you see the characters in the scene. And everybody who reads the book has a different version of that. Okay. Right. When you go see a movie, all you see is the artwork. You can't imagine it any other different way. Okay.
Yeah.
Not with a comic. A comic, again, here we go with that merger. Okay. When you open a comic book and you start reading the panels, you read the words and you're looking at the pictures. If the team has done their job, when you move to the next panel, it's not moving at all. It's a static. Every single picture on a comic book page is a static page. But if they've done their job correctly, guess what happens in here?
Mhm.
You see the motion.
That's true.
You really see the motion. You see the actors move. You see the superhero throw a punch. You see the cowboy ride across the plains on his horse. It's all coming to life in here because you're getting the story by the words, and you're getting the art given to you, but nobody's making it move except your imagination.
Mhm.
Comics are the one media that purposely fires your imagination on all cylinders.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great answer.
Wow.
Great answer. I do want to get structure just really quickly. I of course we work together, so you've heard this from me already, but I think the work you've done for this, of course, makes me even more of a fan of you than I already am, because it gives me a chance to see a different style than sort of what you've already worked on. You've done a lot of stuff for us, but to see you in this flavor, I just think it's really dope. So any last words?
I mean, I'm excited. Oh, someone sees the cactuar. It's something else, but no, there's cactuar there too. Sorry. So I was looking in there. Yeah, I got my little cactuar.
No worries.
I got my chocobo.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Hey, look at that. Some Final Fantasy in there. Well, Ron, I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
It's been a
we could
pleasure,
continue
man.
to
It's
talk
been
all
a
day.
pleasure. Yeah.
Hey, great.
You see how I would just ask you a question and just let you talk because I just feel like listening to
It's
you.
so
is a
much.
treat
It's
in and
just
of
so
itself.
much, man. It's so much.
Hey, you know, you do this for 50 years, guys. You'll be in that place someday, God willing. I love this. I absolutely love it. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me and Joe on board, and letting us, shine a little light on Brother Bones. And hopefully, in 11 days, we're going to have some good news for the whole world. So here we go.
Absolutely. Go
Absolutely.
support Brother Bones
Absolutely.
on Kickstarter. We have the link in the chat. Go support. We'll put it in the description too. Go support that.
Absolutely.
Please help
And I'm
us
going to be
out.
supporting it pretty much every day until the final day. So on my stream, I
Hot
will
dog.
make sure I post that link.
You
every
guys
day,
are
so
great.
At least get
Thanks
enough
again.
eyeballs on it. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good night.
All right, everybody.
Good
We're going to
night.
end the stream. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
Peace.
All right. And